Okay, it's day 464 off the grid. Yes indeed, day 464 with no grid. And as you can see, it's kind of at the end of the day now. The lighthouse is already on. The sun's pretty much gone away now, so it's, it's day Indian, and I'm just wrapping up here today on working what I've been working on. And you might have seen this chassis before on one of my other videos. This formerly was one of my attempts at taming the Morning Star, and I've explained that in depth in another video, but it's not that anymore. I've reworked this chassis into a new role. And if you turn it over, you'll see the result of that. Let's turn it over. Oh, look at that, eh? Impressive. There's my shiny new boost converter that I showed in Post Cunt 2 a wee while back. I've finally had some time to do with it what I wish to do with it, and that is to turn it into this device here, which is to help a battery bank that's powering something in the house overnight that's starting to get a bit low due to bad weather. It's to help that out by feeding some extra current from the backup battery bank, which I've also shown in depth. But this is the missing link, basically. So the premise is pretty simple. You put in like 12.5 or whatever it is from the backup battery, and from the output you get 13.8, enough to basically do the lion's share of running a small but protracted load, like something, like a computer or lighting or something like that, because it doesn't require a huge amount of amps, but it does require a moderate amount of amps for quite a long time, and that really takes it out of the batteries, I've found. It's got a few features here that I've incorporated into this. The switch, for instance, it's got 3 positions. So in position 1 or whatever, in the middle there, that's off, and down turns it all on. But it's got an up position, which is a remote position, so it can be triggered by a remote switching signal, and that will be plugged in this little pin jack here. So that's basically how it works, and I suppose I can talk about what I left on this board and what I've removed. Well, this is the original relay that was part of this board. I've left that on here, but this now performs the function of being the main power switch that switches power into the boost converter, either by that little switch on the front or via remote, obviously a relay. Because I got this arrangement, there was no need for a separate power switch, nor was there any need for an additional fuse or circuit breaker on the input, because there is one on board. However, that presented a little bit of an issue, because the current that is going to be controlling this locally has to come from a relatively low impedance 12 volt source, i.e. the battery bank. Now, without a fuse in that line, you could have problems. So this was my solution. It's a piece of fusible wire. That's right, in fact it's a piece of fuse wire. It's just a piece of 5 amp fuse wire that I've put into this silicone tubing, or spaghetti, whatever you want to call it. So just a piece of domestic 5 amp fuse wire, so if there was a fault on the relay circuit, this would fuse somewhere in here. Naturally that means I'd have to take this unit off the wall, take it in the shed, renew this, but I don't really expect it to ever blow. But in case it ever wanted to, well, it's got some protection there instead of smoking up wires, So that's one little thing. The remote system is very, very simple. It takes either 12 volt directly from the battery that feeds the circuit and pumps it into the relay coil through this yellow wire, or if you selected the remote position, you put 12 volt signal in through the pin jack, and then it'll take it to the relay as well. Then the return of the relay is just grounded to negative. And I did take the prudent step to install a spike clamping diode here for the relay's reverse impulse, when it turns off. Strictly that's not necessary, because there's no solid state gear switching these relays, but still, you know, maybe one day there will be, and I just don't want those impulses going into the system. So I thought, what the hell, I'll solder in a diode. So I just put that across these two little terminals here, and that's all good. Now the other thing that remains from the original Taming the Morningstar circuit is this Schottky diode. It's actually a double Schottky, and I've just wired each half in parallel. Now you can never guarantee doing that you'll get double the amount of current of the single diode in one of these sets, but you know you will at least get more than the single current, so it's still an alright thing to do. I think this one's rated at 10 amps a side, so you know, should be, well, the best it could do would be 20 amps, but realistically it's probably safe up to about, you know, 14-15 amps, so that's plenty. Now this is wired to the output of the boost converter before it goes off to the recipient batteries, because I don't want any chance of a backfeed from those batteries going back into the boost converter. It might not do any harm, but it could be slowly just draining power, sort of powering up parts of the boost converter circuit, so that's really no good. And this here's the output of the boost converter. So it goes, well, it's actually from the boost converter it goes to the circuit breaker, and then from the output of the circuit breaker it comes down here, it goes through the diode and back out here, and this is your output terminal positive. This is the output terminal negative, so these will have a lead which will go off to plug into the batteries that I want to boost. This green wire here is the negative return, which is wired straight through, and I did that very specifically because if you look at the board here, the boost converter itself does in fact have a positive and a negative in, and a positive and a negative out. Unfortunately, the negative is just common from it just straps across from the input to the output. There's a big butty track under the circuit board there. So, as I was expecting it to be, and as I was hoping it would be, because if this wasn't a common negative design, I would have a few problems. But you see, in my arrangement in the solar shed, there's a lot of different points where things are, well, I wouldn't say grounded, it's a negative return, but when this is plugged into the battery you're going to be boosting, you end up creating a loop, which is fine, except that if the return path that the current was originally meant to go down, imagine you're pulling 50 amps from an inverter and its return failed or got sloppy, and the current decided to return back through the cable connected to this, through that little track, which, you know, I said it was butty, but now when we're talking about a current from an inverter, it's a little, and come back out and take this path. Well, that wouldn't be too good. I don't want to be smoking up tracks on my boost converter there, so I hardwired from the input to the output with this green wire, so no return current actually flows through the tracks on this board. Only power to power the boost converter does make it to the board. It doesn't really matter whether you take the output between positive here and negative here, or from there as it's intended. In my situation it was better to just common the output and the input externally, because it protects the board. There's the fuse, which I said that's why I haven't put a circuit breaker on the input. And this is the output circuit breaker. Maybe not strictly necessary, but it's always a good idea to have additional isolation and stuff and safety. But this isn't very safe because you might see, I don't know if this camera's clear enough on there, but that's a 32 amp breaker. Ideally I probably want a 10 amp breaker on there, but I didn't have one handy, so I just chucked this 32 in for now. It's not for overcurrent protection, because this is, of course, has got built-in current limiting, so that's not the issue. The issue is if you had a major shorting fault, this is a safety device. So yeah, I'll swap that out for a 10 amp one, and it will still be an AC breaker like this one is, because AC breakers work perfectly fine on 12 volts DC. So there we go. I think that's about enough now. I'll show you it in operation. Okay, and here we see the boost converter in operation. So all I have to do is flick the switch on. LED comes on, boost converter is active. And then close the circuit breaker. And look, the light comes on. That's actually a 24 volt tail lamp bulb out of a truck in there. It's one of my test bulbs. It's quite a handy test bulb. You can use it as a relatively low current thing for 12 volts and or push 24 volts through it and it won't blow, so it's kind of cool. Put it in the case of this old solar garden light to stop it from getting crushed, because that's not the first bulb I've had on those wires, I'll tell you. But anyway, here we go. It's going. It's working. Shall we do some voltage measurements? Not sure how well I can do this one-handed. Don't want to short something out. Oh no, put the ground over there, and then we can go from there to there. That'll work. Okay, there we go. So that's the voltage being delivered to the bulb, 13.7, which is pretty close to the 13.8 I'm going to tune it to when it's actually in the role of boosting the batteries. And I might as well have a look at the battery voltage too while we're at it, eh? It's not such a risky affair. Yeah, this battery's starting to get run down a bit. There we go, 11.8. So that's the whole point of it, really, is that I can take a backup battery bank, this representing the backup battery bank, at 12 volts, or it might drop a bit below 12, and this will spit out a constant 13.8, which will help run loads when the batteries on that bank are low. You see, it might even start to recharge the batteries a little bit, although that's not the main intention. The main intention is just to stop those batteries from getting discharged too low until such time as either the sun comes back or we do choose to run the generator. So tomorrow I will probably go through the wiring up and mounting phase out of the terminal block under there where this is coming out. Of course, there'll be the leads that go to the battery connections, and I'll show more about that once it's installed. And these ones here will go to the backup battery bank, either to the board or directly to the batteries. I haven't decided on that one yet. It probably wouldn't matter which way around, well, not which way around, but if I go directly to the battery terminals or up to the control board already in there, because this is only going to be tuned to put out about 5 amps on the output, so it won't be taking too much more than that from the input, so that length of cable shouldn't really make much of a difference. So there we go, and that's on day 464 off the grid.